Have you ever had your head slammed against a car door by a family member in a grimy motel parking lot, only to realize it was the luckiest moment of your life? Within 72 hours of that slap, my family's $60 million empire changed hands without them even understanding why. The stranger who slipped me that card was not a savior. She was the match I had been waiting years to strike. My name is Rosalie Cole. If you had asked me an hour ago who I was, I would have given you the rehearsed answer I had perfected over 3 years of suffocation. I would have told you I was the night manager of the High Plains Lodge, a 30-year-old woman trying to keep her father's business from sliding into the red, a dutiful daughter holding up a crumbling ceiling with her bare hands. But as the cold asphalt of the parking lot scraped against the soles of my sensible work shoes, I realized that definition was about to expire. It was a Tuesday night in late October, the kind of Denver night where the air feels thin and sharp enough to cut glass. The sky above the motel was a bruised purple, illuminated by the erratic buzzing of our main neon sign. The letter O in Lodge had been flickering for 6 months, casting a nervous, epileptic strobe over the wet pavement. I could hear the low, mechanical hum of 20 different window air conditioning units rattling in unison, a chorus of machinery fighting a losing battle against the age of the building. I had just been handing a room key to a guest, a tired man with grease under his fingernails, who just wanted a hot shower. When the lobby door flew open, I did not have time to apologize to him. I did not even have time to let go of the key card. Monica Hale, my stepmother, had me by the upper arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong, her fingernails digging through the cheap polyester of my navy blue blazer, finding the soft flesh underneath. She did not ask me to step outside. She dragged me. "You think I am stupid?" Monica hissed, her voice vibrating with a pitch that cut right through the traffic noise from the highway. "You think I do not know how to count?" I stumbled as we hit the curb, the heel of my shoe catching on a crack in the concrete, but she yanked me upright, pulling me further into the parking lot, away from the safety of the glass doors but directly into the view of the smoking area. "Monica, let go," I said, my voice tight. I was not shouting. I never shouted. I was the one who de-escalated drunk guests at 2 a.m. I was the one who smoothed over overbooked rooms. I was the professional. "We have guests watching. Lower your voice." There were 3 of them standing near the vending machines, 2 men in flannel shirts and a woman clutching a thin robe around herself, cigarettes suspended halfway to their mouths. They watched us with the dull, detached interest of people who had paid $49 for a room and expected a show. Monica ignored them. She spun me around, her face inches from mine. She smelled of expensive vanilla perfume and the stale smoke of the slim cigarettes she chain-smoked in the back office. Her blonde hair was sprayed into a helmet of perfection that did not move even in the wind. "The register is short," she spat. $40. Rosalie, $40 missing from the cash drop." I stared at her, genuinely baffled. I handled accounts payable. I managed the renovation budget. I had personally negotiated a 15% reduction in our laundry service costs last month. The idea that I would steal $40 from the front desk was so absurd, it was almost funny. "I haven't touched the cash drop," I said, trying to pull my arm free. "Check the shift log." Tyler was covering the desk for 20 minutes while I fixed the ice machine on the second floor. The mention of her son, my half-brother, made her eyes narrow. Tyler was 20, and in Monica's eyes, he was a golden calf who could do no wrong, even though I spent half my week correcting his data entry errors. "Do not you dare blame him," she screamed, her composure cracking. "You are a parasite, Rosalie. That is what you are. You live here rent-free. You eat our food, and you steal from the very hand that feeds you. You are an ungrateful, jealous little leech." The words landed like physical blows, not because they were true, but because of the sheer volume. The guests by the vending machine were whispering now. The humiliation began to rise up my neck, hot and prickly, contrasting with the freezing air. I was a qualified architect. I had graduated top of my class, and here I was, standing in a puddle of motor oil. being dressed down like a delinquent teenager by a woman who had never worked a day of manual labor in her life. "I am not doing this here," I said, my voice hardening. "We can go inside. We can look at the accounting software. We can look at the security footage. If money is missing, the logs will show who opened the drawer." "You want to talk about logs?" Monica shouted. She was shaking now, a manic energy taking over. "You think you are so smart with your spreadsheets and your little renovation projects? You are nothing without this family. Nothing." She shoved me. It was not a playful push. It was a full-body shove, fueled by years of resentment she had been storing up every time my father took my advice over hers. I stumbled back, my feet slipping on the wet tarmac. My shoulder blades slammed into the side of the motel's maintenance truck, a 1998 Ford pickup that was more rust than paint. The impact knocked the wind out of me. Before I could regain my balance, Monica stepped in close, her hand flying up. The slap was loud, a sharp, wet crack that echoed off the concrete walls of the motel. My head snapped to the side, colliding with the metal doorframe of the truck. For a second, the world went white. A high-pitched ringing filled my ears, drowning out the hum of the air conditioners. I tasted copper in my mouth. My knees buckled, and I slid down the side of the truck, catching myself on the door handle before I hit the ground. I was not knocked out, but I was dazed. The neon light above seemed to smear into a long purple streak. I blinked, trying to clear the static from my vision. I touched my lip. It was wet. "Get up," Monica sneered, looming over me. "Stop being dramatic." I stayed where I was, one hand on the cold metal of the truck, the other touching my throbbing cheek. The pain was sharp, throbbing in time with my heartbeat. But through the haze, my architect's brain, the part of me that noticed details, angles, and structures, locked onto something. Directly above us, mounted on the corner of the second-floor walkway, was a black dome. It was a security camera, not one of the dummy cameras Monica had installed 3 years ago to save money. This was a high-definition, wide-angle unit I had insisted we purchase last November after a series of car break-ins. I had installed it myself. I knew the specs, I knew the frame rate, and I knew exactly where the lens was pointed. It was pointed right at the maintenance truck. I blinked again, the pain receding just enough to let a cold realization wash over me. That camera had a microphone. I looked up at Monica. She was breathing hard, fixing a stray lock of hair, completely oblivious to the unblinking eye recording her assault in 1080p resolution. She thought she was the queen of this kingdom, dispensing justice to a peasant. She had no idea she had just starred in her own downfall. But then, my gaze drifted past Monica. About 20 feet away, in the shadow of a concrete pillar that supported the second-floor balcony, a woman was standing. She was not a guest. Guests at the High Plains Lodge wore sweatpants, jeans, or trucker hats. They looked tired and road-worn. This woman looked like she had just stepped out of a boardroom in downtown Chicago. She was wearing a dark, tailored pantsuit that probably cost more than my car. Her hair was pulled back in a severe, elegant bun, not a strand out of place. She was holding a phone to her ear, but she was not speaking. Her eyes were not on the ground or on the distance. They were locked on me. She stood perfectly still, like a statue carved out of shadow. She had seen the drag. She had seen the shove. She had seen the slap. And unlike the guests by the vending machine who were awkwardly looking away now, this woman did not flinch. She just watched, her expression unreadable. Monica stepped back, smoothing down the front of her cashmere cardigan. The rage seemed to drain out of her, replaced by a smug satisfaction. She looked down at me with pure disgust. "You are done," Monica said, her voice dropping to a cold, flat tone. "Tomorrow morning, you hand in your keys. I want you out of this motel. Take your trash with you." She turned on her heel and marched back toward the lobby, her heels clicking rhythmically on the pavement, leaving me slumped against the truck in the freezing wind. I stayed there for a moment, letting the cold seep into my uniform. My head throbbed. The humiliation was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest. I felt small, I felt stupid. I had given up a career, a life, and my own happiness to help these people. And this was my severance package: a split lip and an eviction notice in a parking lot. I used the truck door to pull myself up. My legs felt shaky. I wiped my mouth with the back of my hand, seeing a smear of bright red blood against my pale skin. Rough night. The voice was low, calm, and sounded like polished steel. I flinched, turning toward the pillar. The woman in the suit had stepped out of the shadows, up close. She was older than I had thought, perhaps in her early 50s, with sharp features and eyes that were intelligent and incredibly intense. She did not look like she belonged within 10 miles of this place. "I am fine," I said automatically, straightening my jacket, trying to salvage some shred of dignity. "Just a family disagreement. I am sorry you had to see that. Ma'am, if you are looking for check-in, the lobby is straight ahead." The woman did not move toward the lobby. She took 2 steps toward me, her heels making no sound on the wet asphalt. "I saw everything," she said. It was not a question. It was a statement of fact, delivered with the precision of a court reporter. "And judging by the way you took that hit without screaming, I am guessing it is not the first time she has put her hands on you, or at least, not the first time she has tried to break you." I stiffened. "Who are you? Are you with the bank?" That was my first fear. The bank was always threatening to audit us. If they saw the management fighting in the parking lot, they would pull our line of credit. The woman's lips curved into a smile that did not quite reach her eyes. It was a terrifyingly confident smile. She reached into her blazer pocket. "No, Rosalie, I am not with the bank." She knew my name. I had not been wearing a name tag. She extended a hand. Nestled between her index and middle finger was a heavy cream-colored card. "Take it," she said. I hesitated, then reached out. The card was thick, textured. I angled it toward the flickering neon light to read the embossed black text. Evelyn Rhodes, Strategic Litigation and Asset Recovery, Rhodes and Calder Associates. I looked up at her, confusion warring with the throbbing headache. "Litigation? I do not understand. I do not have any money for a lawyer. I just lost my job." Evelyn Rhodes took a step closer, invading my personal space just enough to lower her voice to a whisper that carried more weight than Monica's screaming ever could. "You did not just lose a job, Rosalie. You just successfully gathered the final piece of evidence needed to dismantle a fraudulent dictatorship." She looked at the security camera I had noticed earlier, then back at me. Her eyes were dark and knowing. "When you are ready to stop letting them decide your value, call the number on that card," she said. "Your family is not as rich as they think they are, but you are not nearly as poor as you think you are." Before I could ask what she meant, before I could ask how she knew who I was or why she was standing in a dirty motel parking lot at 9 at night, she turned and walked away. She moved toward a black sedan parked in the darkest corner of the lot, getting in and driving away without looking back. I stood there alone, the wind biting at my exposed skin, clutching the card so tightly the edges dug into my palm. My lip was bleeding, my head was spinning, and I had just been fired by my stepmother, but for the first time in 3 years. As I looked at the name, Evelyn Rhodes, I did not feel tired. I felt like something was burning, and I realized, with a sudden, terrifying clarity, that I was the one holding the match. 3 years ago, the only thing on my hands was graphite dust and the smell of expensive drafting paper. I was 27 years old, living in a studio apartment in Chicago that was smaller than the storage closet I currently managed, and I had never been happier. I had just graduated at the top of my class from the School of the Art Institute, and on my desk sat an offer letter from Skyline Atelier. It was the kind of firm that designed museums in Oslo and libraries in Tokyo. The starting salary was $75,000, which felt like a fortune to a girl who had grown up watching her father calculate the cost of laundry detergent down to the penny. I was supposed to start on the 1st of September. I had bought a bottle of champagne. I had called my landlord to break my lease. I was ready to build skyscrapers. Then the phone rang at 2 in the morning. It was not a dramatic call. There were no sirens screaming in the background. It was just a nurse from a hospital in Redstone Ridge, telling me that my father, Daniel Cole, had collapsed behind the front desk of the High Plains Lodge. It was a mild myocardial infarction, she said, a warning shot from a heart that had been carrying too much debt and too much cholesterol for too long. I did not pack my drafting tools. I packed a week's worth of clothes. I told the partners at Skyline Atelier that I needed a fortnight to settle a family emergency. They were understanding. They told me the desk would be waiting. When I arrived at the hospital, the air smelled of antiseptic and floor wax. My father looked small in the hospital bed, his skin the color of old parchment. But it was not seeing him that froze the blood in my veins. It was seeing who was holding his hand. Monica Hale. I knew her only vaguely as the freelance bookkeeper my father had hired 6 months prior to organize the motel's chaotic tax returns. In the hospital room, she was not wearing her accountant's visor. She was wearing a look of practiced devastation, smoothing the sheets over my father's legs with a possessiveness that set my teeth on edge. He was working too hard, Monica told me, not even standing up to greet me. Her eyes were dry, clear, and cold as ice. I told him the stress of the vendors was too much. I told him I could handle it, but he is stubborn. Your father, he wanted to leave something for you. That was the first hook, the guilt. I went to the motel the next day, intending to just keep the lights on until Dad was discharged. What I found was a disaster. The High Plains Lodge was bleeding money. The occupancy rate was hovering around 40%. The reviews online were brutal, citing musty smells, flickering lights, and a general atmosphere of despair. I told myself I could fix it, not as a manager, but as an architect. I saw the problems not as business failures, but as design flaws. The lobby flow was wrong. The lighting was aggressive. The rooms felt like prison cells because of how the furniture was arranged. I rolled up my sleeves. I told Skyline I needed another month. That month became the longest month of my life. While Dad recovered at home, confined to bed rest by Monica's strict orders, I took the night shift. I worked from 11 at night until 7 in the morning, checking in truckers and lost tourists. In the quiet hours between 2 and 4, when the lobby was empty, I did not sleep. I worked. I redid the vendor contracts first. I found out we were paying 20% above market rate for linens, because the previous supplier was a friend of a friend. I cut that cord and negotiated a deal with a commercial service in Denver. Then I went after the rooms. We could not afford a full renovation, so I used what I knew. I changed the lighting temperature from a sterile, cool white to a warm 3000 Kelvin. It cost almost nothing, but it made the rooms feel cozy instead of clinical. I ripped up the stained carpets in the worst rooms myself, stripping the floor down to the concrete, staining it, and sealing it for an industrial chic look that was trendy in Chicago but unheard of in a roadside motel. I rearranged the furniture to maximize natural light. I took photos with my own camera, staging the rooms to look like a boutique escape rather than a pit stop. I updated the booking listings. I responded to every single review, turning angry one-star rants into opportunities to show we cared. Within 3 months, occupancy was up to 65%. We were profitable for the first time in 5 years. I remember the dinner where I presented these numbers to Dad. We were eating at the dining table in the main house, a pot roast Monica had made. Dad looked better, though still frail. I laid out the spreadsheets, the before and after photos, the projected revenue for the next quarter. I was proud. I felt like I had designed a sturdy bridge over a canyon. "The numbers look incredible," Dad said, smiling at the papers. I knew it could turn around. "It is not just luck, Dad," I started to say. I renegotiated the linen contract, and the room redesign has allowed us to raise the rate by $15 a night. Monica reached over and placed her hand on top of the spreadsheet, effectively covering my work. "We have been working so hard on the strategy," Monica said, beaming at Dad. "I am so glad the management decisions I implemented are finally paying off. I told you, Daniel, if we just tightened the belt and refreshed the brand, it would work." I stared at her. "You implemented?" "Monica, I spent 4 weeks on my knees staining concrete. I stayed up until dawn replying to TripAdvisor reviews. Monica turned that cold gaze on me, the one that the guests never saw. Rosalie, honey, labor is one thing, vision is another. You followed the plan, and you did a good job executing it. But let us not stress your father with the nitty-gritty of who scrubbed what floor. The point is, the business is safe. I looked at Dad. I waited for him to correct her. I waited for him to say, "Actually, Monica, Rosalie did this." Dad just patted Monica's hand. "You are right. You are a miracle worker. Monica, both of you. I do not know what I would do without you girls." He grouped us together, the architect and the parasite. That night, I went back to my room and opened my laptop. There was an email from the hiring manager at Skyline Atelier. The subject line was simply, "Final check-in." "Rosalie," it read, "we have held the position for 90 days. We need to know if you are coming to Chicago. If we do not hear from you by Friday, we have to offer the spot to the next candidate." I hovered my mouse over the reply button. I could type, "Yes." I could pack my car in an hour. I could leave Monica to her delusions and let the motel sink or swim. But then I heard Dad coughing in the next room. It was a wet, heavy cough. I thought about the heart monitor. I thought about the look of relief on his face when he saw the profit margins. "When everything is stable," Dad had told me a week earlier, during a rare moment alone, "I am going to transfer the majority ownership to you. Rosalie, you are the one keeping this thing alive. This is your legacy, not mine. I just want to rest." That promise was the shackle. It was a heavy golden chain that bound me to Redstone Ridge. If I left, the motel would fail. Dad would lose his retirement, and Monica would likely loot the remains. If I stayed, I was working for a future that was technically mine, even if I was currently being treated like a servant. I closed the laptop. I did not reply to Skyline Atelier. Friday came and went, and with it, the life I had built for myself in Chicago. The pattern set in like concrete hardening. 6 months became a year. A year became 2. Every time I reached a breaking point, every time I saved up enough money to convince myself I could start over, a crisis would strike. One time, the main boiler exploded in the middle of December. It was a $20,000 repair. Dad was panic-stricken. I stayed to manage the contractors and secured a financing plan because Monica's credit score was mysteriously too low to qualify. Another time, Dad had a scare with his blood pressure. The doctor said he needed 0 stress. I took on the day shift and the night shift for 3 weeks straight, sleeping 4 hours a night on a cot in the back office, while Monica went to spa retreats to manage her own caregiver burnout. I stopped drawing buildings. I stopped looking at Architectural Digest. My world shrank down to the size of a motel room key. I became an expert in plumbing, in conflict resolution, in laundry detergents, and in swallowing my pride. I watched as Monica slowly isolated Dad. She fired the old housekeeping staff, people who had known me since I was a child, and hired cheaper, transient workers who only answered to her. She changed the locks on the office door. She moved the physical ledgers to a safe only she knew the combination to. But I stayed. I stayed because of the promise. This will be yours. I told myself I was earning my inheritance through sweat equity. I told myself that I was the smart one, the educated one, and that eventually, logic would win. I did not realize then that logic has no place in a house built on manipulation. I was building a castle on a foundation that someone else was actively undermining with a pickaxe. I was not the heir apparent. I was the battery they were draining to keep the lights on while they looked for a buyer. And the hardest part? I let them do it. I traded my dream for a sense of duty, thinking it was noble. I did not know yet that there is a difference between loyalty and martyrdom. 3 years of my life, gone. So when Monica slapped me in that parking lot, it was not just the physical pain that stung. It was the sudden, violent realization that the last 3 years, the missed job, the ruined knees, the sleepless nights, had bought me absolutely nothing. I had been waiting for a reward that was never coming. I had been playing a game where the rules were written in invisible ink, and I was the only one who didn't know I had already lost. Until the stranger in the suit handed me a way to burn the game board down. 2 weeks before Monica struck me in the parking lot, she invited me to dinner. It was not a social invitation, it was a summons. The dining room of the main house, which was attached to the motel office, had always been my father's sanctuary. It was where we used to eat pizza on Friday nights and discuss his favorite Western movies. But that Tuesday evening, the room did not smell like pepperoni or nostalgia. It smelled of furniture polish and expensive cologne. When I walked in, the table was already set, but not for a meal. The placemats had been pushed aside to make room for stacks of legal-sized paper, neatly bound with binder clips. My father, Daniel, was sitting at the head of the table. He looked smaller than usual, slumped in his chair, his eyes glassy and unfocused. A half-eaten bowl of soup sat in front of him, cold and untouched. To his right sat Monica. She was upright, vibrant, practically vibrating with energy. She wore a silk blouse and the kind of smile a shark gives before it bites the hull of a boat. Next to her was Tyler, my half-brother, at 20 years old. Tyler was not malicious, just profoundly uninterested in anything that did not happen on a screen. He was slumped over his phone, thumbs tapping furiously, ignoring the tension in the room as if it were background noise. And then there was the stranger. A man in a gray suit sat to my father's left. He had a face like crumpled paper and eyes that blinked too slowly. "Rosalie," Monica said, gesturing to the empty chair opposite her. "Sit down. We have some exciting news. This is Gregory Pike. He is a specialist in family estate planning." I did not sit. I stood by the door, my guard instantly up. "I thought we were discussing the roof repairs for Building B. The leak is getting worse." "Building B can wait," Monica said, her voice sugary but firm. "We are talking about the future. Rosalie, the big picture. Gregory has come up with a brilliant plan to protect the family assets. Tax optimization. You know how the government loves to take what we earn. Asset protection is crucial," Gregory Pike said. His voice was dry, like dead leaves skittering on pavement. "Especially given your father's health. We need to restructure the ownership to ensure liability is minimized." I looked at Dad. "Dad, what is this?" Daniel looked at Monica, then at the table, then finally at me. He looked tired. "It is just paperwork, honey. Monica says it will help keep the motel safe. You know I do not understand the legal stuff." I slowly pulled out the chair and sat down. "Okay, let me see the plan." Monica slid a heavy document across the mahogany table. The cover page read, HPL Frontier Holdings, Operating Agreement. I flipped it open. I had learned to read contracts over the last 3 years. I knew how to look for the fine print in vendor agreements, so I knew exactly where to look now. I skipped the preamble and went straight to the ownership structure. My breath hitched in my throat. HPL Frontier Holdings, the new entity that would absorb all assets of the High Plains Lodge, listed 2 primary shareholders: Monica Hale, 51%, Tyler Hale, 30%, Daniel Cole, 19%. I scanned the page again, looking for my name. It was not there. "Where am I?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Keep reading," Monica said, tapping a thinner stack of papers next to the main document. "We prepared a special package for you. Since you have been working so hard, we wanted to give you a clean break." I picked up the second document. It was titled Severance and Release Agreement. Section 1 detailed a one-time payout, $40,000. $40,000 for 3 years of 80-hour weeks, for acting as general manager, head of maintenance, interior designer, and crisis counselor. It amounted to less than minimum wage if you broke it down by hour. But it was Section 4 that made my blood run cold. Non-competition covenant. I read the paragraph twice to make sure I was not hallucinating. The undersigned agrees that for a period of 7 years, she shall not own, manage, operate, consult for, or be employed by any business in the hospitality or lodging industry, nor provide architectural or interior design services to any such business, within a radius of 500 miles of Redstone Ridge. I looked up, feeling the room tilt. Is this a joke? It is standard procedure, Gregory Pike said, bored. To protect the proprietary business strategies of the new holding company, we cannot have a former manager taking trade secrets to a competitor down the road. Trade secrets? I laughed. A harsh, jagged sound. I wrote the trade secrets, Gregory. I designed the rooms. I negotiated the contracts. And this clause? 500 miles? That bans me from working in Denver. That bans me from working in half the state of Colorado, plus parts of Wyoming and Utah. You are not just firing me. You are exiling me. You are being dramatic, Monica said, waving a hand dismissively. You can still be an architect, Rosalie, just design, houses, or dog kennels, or whatever it is you like to draw. I looked at my father. He was staring at his soup again. Dad, I said, leaning forward, do you see this? They are cutting me out of the company. You promised me. You said when things were stable, the motel would be mine. You said I was the one keeping it alive. Dad sighed, a long, rattling exhalation. He looked up at me, and his eyes were filled with a terrible, passive pity. It was the look of a man who had surrendered his will to keep the peace. Rosalie, he said, his voice weak, you have never really liked business. You are creative. You are an artist. Monica thinks, and I agree, that the stress of running the place is holding you back. This money, $40,000 is a lot of money. You could go to Europe. You could paint. The words hit me harder than a physical blow. You are an artist. He was using my own passion, the very talent I had sacrificed to save his legacy, as a weapon to disinherit me. He was rewriting history to make my eviction sound like a favor. I am not a painter, Dad, I said, my voice trembling. I am an architect, and I am a damn good manager. I raised our revenue by 40%. Do you think that happened by magic? It was a team effort, Monica interrupted sharply. And frankly, Rosalie, your management style is abrasive. The staff complains. This is best for everyone. Which staff? I challenged. Mrs. Gable? The maintenance crew? They love me. The only person who complains is you. The documents are already drawn up, Pike interrupted, tapping his pen on the table. We just need your signature on the release to process the check. My eyes drifted back to the main operating agreement, the one transferring the motel to Monica and Tyler. I noticed something on the bottom of the page. My father's signature was already there. It was shaky, the ink slightly smeared, but it was there, and next to it, the date was from 3 days ago. You already signed it, I said, looking at Dad. The betrayal felt like a stone in my stomach. You signed the transfer before you even talked to me. Dad blinked, looking confused. Monica brought me some papers at the cardiologist's office. She said it was for the insurance renewal, just routine paperwork. It was not insurance, Dad. I slammed the table, making the silverware jump. Tyler finally looked up from his phone, blinking owlishly. You signed away the business. You gave her 51%. Do you understand what that means? She does not need your permission to do anything anymore. She can sell it. She can leverage it. She owns you. Lower your voice, Monica snapped. Her mask of civility dropped completely. Her eyes were hard, calculating. Your father trusts me. He knows I have his best interests at heart. Unlike you, who only cares about your inheritance. I am not signing this, I said, pushing the severance agreement away. I am not taking your $40,000, and I am certainly not signing a non-compete that destroys my career. Monica leaned forward. She did not look angry. She looked like a predator who had anticipated the prey's struggle. If you do not sign, she said softly, we will have to make some difficult budget cuts immediately. The transition costs are high. She picked up a glass of wine and took a sip. I might have to let Mrs. Gable go. She has arthritis. You know, she is slow. And maybe the night maintenance guy. What is his name? Ben? He has 3 kids, doesn't he? If we cannot streamline the ownership, we have to streamline the payroll, starting tomorrow. I stared at her in horror. She was holding the livelihoods of the people I cared about hostage. She knew I treated the staff like family. She knew I covered their shifts when they were sick. And your father, she added, her voice dropping to a whisper that only I could hear clearly. Stress is so bad for his heart. If you drag this out, if you make this a legal battle, well, I cannot guarantee his insurance will cover everything if I'm too busy fighting you to file the paperwork. Do you really want to be the reason he has another attack? The room went silent. The only sound was the clicking of the radiator and the soft tapping of Tyler's thumbs on his screen. I looked at Gregory Pike. He was checking his watch. I looked at Tyler. He was in another world. I looked at Dad. He was shrinking into his chair, a man who had chosen comfort over truth. I stood up. My legs felt heavy, but my mind was racing. I realized then that there was no negotiation. This was not a meeting. It was an execution. I need time to read it, I said. My voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. You have until Friday, Monica said, leaning back, triumphant. After that, the offer drops to $20,000, and the layoffs begin. I walked out of the dining room without looking back. I walked through the kitchen, out the back door, and into the cold night air. I did not cry. I was past crying. I felt a cold, hard knot tightening in my chest. They thought they had trapped me. They thought they had stripped me of my value. They thought that by calling me an artist, they could dismiss my competence. But as I stood in the dark, looking at the motel I had saved, I realized they had made a fatal error. They assumed I would break. They assumed that because I had sacrificed for 3 years, I was weak. They did not know that an architect's first job is to understand the structure of a building. And once you understand how a thing is built, you know exactly where to place the dynamite to bring it down. They thought I was dormant. They thought that when I put down my drafting pencil to pick up a toilet plunger, the architect in me had died. They were wrong. She had just gone underground. Monica believed she had trapped me in a cage of mediocrity, but she made one critical mistake. She assumed that because she controlled the physical space of the High Plains Lodge, she controlled my mind. She did not know about the invisible world I had built right under her nose, hidden inside the very computer she used to check her horoscope. For 2 years, I had been living a double life. By day, I was Rosalie Cole, the exhausted manager dealing with bedbug scares and broken ice machines. But by night, usually between the hours of 1 and 4 in the morning, I was H. Rowan, the lead architect and sole proprietor of Northwind Habitat Studio. I had registered the LLC in Chicago using a digital mailbox service, so the address would never trace back to a dusty motel in Colorado. My website was minimalist, just a portfolio of renderings and a contact form, stripped of any personal bio that could give me away, to the world. H. Rowan was a reclusive designer with a knack for transforming small, difficult spaces into architectural gems. I worked on a laggy desktop computer in the back office, the fan whirring loudly as it struggled to render 3D models to keep Monica from snooping. I hid my entire professional life inside a folder named Old Tax Records 1998. Monica was allergic to taxes and history, so it was the safest place on the hard drive. While my father slept and Monica dreamed of spending money she had not earned, I was designing eco-cabins in Oregon. I was sketching the interior renovation for a boutique hostel in Austin. I was consulting on a glamping site in the Adirondacks. I communicated with clients exclusively via email and scheduled Zoom calls for the rare occasions when Monica went to get her hair done. I was not making a fortune, but I was making enough to stash away a secret emergency fund. More importantly, I was keeping my sanity. 6 months ago, a niche architectural digest called The Modern Nomad featured one of my hostel designs. They called H. Rowan, a fresh voice in transient living, bringing dignity and light to temporary spaces. I remember reading that article on my phone while unclogging a drain in room 12, tears stinging my eyes. I wanted to run into the office and show my father. I wanted to say, "Look, Dad, I am still me." But I could not. If Monica knew I had an income stream she could not touch, she would have cut off the motel funds used for Dad's medication, claiming I could afford to pay for it myself. So, Rowan remained a ghost. Then came the email that changed everything. It arrived on a Tuesday, 3 weeks before the parking lot incident. I was sitting at the front desk, eating a cold sandwich, when a notification pinged from the Northwind account. The subject line read, "Invitation to tender, the Silverline Horizons project." I nearly choked on my lunch. Silverline Horizons Group was not just a developer, they were a titan. They were a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate known for building high-end wellness resorts. I clicked the email, my hand trembling slightly. "Dear Rowan, we have been following your work on the Micro-Living Initiative in Seattle. We are impressed by your ability to maximize utility without sacrificing aesthetics. We are currently accepting concept proposals for a new $35 million project, a hybrid recovery and rehabilitation center for veterans, blending high-end hospitality with therapeutic design. We would like to invite Northwind Habitat Studio to submit a preliminary concept. $35 million. The design fee alone would be enough to buy the High Plains Lodge 3 times over." I read the brief. They wanted a space that felt like a home, not a hospital. They wanted to take people who felt displaced, soldiers returning to a world that no longer fit them, and give them a place to land. I looked around the lobby of our motel. I looked at the flickering fluorescent light I had been begging Monica to replace for months. I looked at the worn-out carpet where people dragged their heavy suitcases, looking for a place to rest their heads for a night. I knew this feeling. I knew what it was like to be in a place that was not quite a home, waiting for life to start again. I spent the next 2 weeks in a fugue state. During the day, I was the obedient stepdaughter. I nodded when Monica lectured me about saving money on paper clips. I apologized when Tyler forgot to lock the supply closet. But the second my shift ended, I dove into the tax records folder. I designed a facility that borrowed the architectural language of the classic American motel, the courtyard, the external walkways, the sense of community, but elevated it. I replaced the asphalt parking lots with healing gardens. I turned the cramped rooms into light-filled studios with clerestory windows. I poured every ounce of my frustration, my longing for stability, and my empathy for the weary traveler into that design. While I was building a $35 million dream on a screen, the nightmare in the real world was escalating. One afternoon, a vendor named Mr. Henderson came by to inspect the new HVAC units I had ordered. I was behind the desk, organizing receipts, when Monica swept out of her office. "Mr. Henderson?" she chirped, extending a manicured hand. "So good to see you. I hope you like what we have done with the place. The rustic wood finishes in the lobby?" That was my vision. I told the team we needed to bring the outside in. I froze. The wood finishes she was bragging about were reclaimed barn wood I had personally sourced from a demolished shed 2 counties over. I had sanded them myself in the garage because Monica refused to pay for a carpenter. Mr. Henderson looked impressed. "It is beautiful, Mrs. Hale. You have a real eye for design." "Thank you," Monica beamed, flipping her hair. "It is all about attention to detail. Some people just see a motel, but I see potential." She glanced at me, her eyes dismissive. "Rosalie, be a dear and fetch Mr. Henderson a bottle of water and check the inventory in the back. You look like you need something to do." I stood there, my knuckles white as I gripped the counter. I wanted to scream. I wanted to pull up the CAD files on the computer and show them the timestamps. "I drew this. I built this. You just criticized the cost." But I did not. I fetched the water. I played the role of the dull, unimaginative employee because I had a bigger game to play. That night, I received a follow-up email from Silverline Horizons. Rowan. "Your concept has been selected for the final round. You are one of 3 finalists. We would like to schedule a video review next month." My heart hammered against my ribs. I was in the final 3. But then I read the next paragraph, and the blood drained from my face. Please note that we are also reviewing a competing proposal from Evercrest Capital Partners, who are looking to acquire existing properties for conversion. However, we prefer your new build approach. Evercrest Capital Partners. The name sounded familiar. I dug through the stack of mail on Monica's desk, the mail she told me never to touch. I found a letter from a week ago, marked confidential. It was a letter of intent from Evercrest Capital Partners, expressing interest in acquiring the High Plains Lodge as part of a land grab in Redstone Ridge. The pieces clicked together like a terrifying puzzle. Monica was pushing to transfer the ownership to HPL Frontier Holdings because she was already secretly negotiating to sell the entire business to Evercrest. She wanted to cut me out before the sale went through so she wouldn't have to share the buyout money. And unknowingly, my secret alter ego, Rowan, was the main obstacle to her plan. Silverline Horizons was debating between building my design or buying Monica's property through Evercrest. I was literally competing against my own inheritance. If Silverline chose my design, they wouldn't need the land Evercrest was trying to buy. Monica's big payday would vanish. If they chose the acquisition model, my design would be scrapped, and Monica would sell the motel out from under my father, leaving me with nothing. I sat back in the creaky office chair, the irony tasting like ash in my mouth. Then, I saw something else on the desk, a bank statement for the motel's Capital Improvements Fund. This was the account I had set up to save for the roof repairs on Building B. It should have had $25,000 in it. I opened the envelope. The balance was $1,200. I scanned the transaction history. There were no withdrawals for roofing contractors. There were no payments for lumber. Instead, there was a series of transfers labeled marketing expenses and consulting fees, all sent to an account I didn't recognize. And one debit for $4,000 to Redstone Auto Detail and Performance. I felt a sick lurch in my stomach. I stood up and walked to the window, peering out at the parking lot. There, parked under the one working street lamp, was Tyler's car. It was a used Honda Civic, but it looked different. It had new rims. It had a custom spoiler. It had a fresh, expensive paint job that shimmered under the lights. Marketing expenses, I whispered to the empty room. Monica wasn't just stealing my credit. She was looting the company accounts to pimp out her son's ride while the roof over our guests' heads was leaking. That was the moment the switch flipped. I was done being the victim. I was done waiting for my father to wake up. I pulled a flash drive from my pocket. It was a 64-gigabyte drive I used for my architectural backups. I plugged it into the office computer. I did not just copy the tax records 1998 folder. I opened the accounting software. I exported the last 5 years of ledgers. I went into the email server and downloaded Monica's entire sent folder, including her correspondence with Evercrest. I accessed the security camera archives and downloaded the footage of Tyler driving his newly modified car onto the lot during work hours. I found the scanned copies of the documents my father had signed while medicated. The progress bar on the screen crawled forward, 20%, 50%, 90%. I could hear Monica's footsteps in the hallway. She was laughing, talking to Tyler. "Just tell her you were helping me with inventory," Monica was saying. "She is too tired to notice the details." The progress bar hit 100%. I yanked the drive out and shoved it into my bra just as the door handle turned. Monica walked in, spotting me sitting at the desk. Her eyes narrowed. "What are you doing in here? You are supposed to be at the front desk." "Just checking the weather report," I said, my voice steady. "It looks like a storm is coming." "Well, get back to work," she snapped. "We have a business to run." I stood up and walked past her, feeling the cold plastic of the flash drive against my skin. It felt like a weapon. "You are right, Monica," I thought as I walked back out into the chilly lobby. "We do have a business to run, and I am about to show you exactly how I run mine." I was no longer just the daughter she could bully. I was Rowan. I was a finalist for a $35 million contract, and I now held the digital keys to her destruction. I sat down at the front desk, adjusted my blazer, and smiled at a guest walking through the door. "Welcome to High Plains Lodge," I said. "How can I help you?" The game had officially begun. The adrenaline from the parking lot had faded, leaving behind a cold, throbbing ache in my cheek and a metallic taste in my mouth. I sat in the cramped night manager's office, the same room where I had downloaded Monica's secrets weeks ago, and stared at the cream-colored card resting on the scarred laminate desk. Evelyn Rhodes. My pride was screaming at me to tear it up. I did not want to be a charity case. I did not want to be the damsel who needed a mysterious stranger to swoop in and save her from the wicked stepmother. I was H. Rowan. I was a finalist for a massive architectural contract. I could handle this myself. But then I touched my lip. It was swollen. My hands were shaking. Not from fear, but from a rage so cold it felt like hypothermia. I picked up my phone and typed Rhodes and Calder Associates into the search bar. The results loaded instantly. They were not the kind of soft focus, approachable lawyer profiles you see on billboards. The firm was based in Seattle, housed in a glass monolith downtown. The first headline that popped up was from a business journal. "The Iron Grip of Asset Recovery: How Evelyn Rhodes Dismantled the Sterling Estate." I read the article. It detailed how Evelyn had represented a disinherited son against a board of directors who had forged a will. She hadn't just won the case. She had exposed a decade of embezzlement that sent 3 people to federal prison. The review section was sparse, but the comments were telling. "She does not just win," one user wrote. "She performs an autopsy on the company while the patient is still awake." She was expensive, she was ruthless, and she was sitting in a car somewhere in my parking lot, waiting. I looked at the card again. Strategic litigation. I took a breath, smoothed my hair, and dialed the number. "I am looking for general consultation regarding an employment dispute and potential minority shareholder rights," I said the moment the line connected, keeping my voice flat and professional. I refused to sound like a victim. "Rosalie." The voice on the other end was clear, stripping away my pretense instantly. "I am at the diner down the road, the one with the broken neon coffee cup. Be there in 20 minutes, and bring the flash drive you are hiding in your bra." The line went dead. I stared at the phone. She knew about the drive. How could she possibly know about the drive? I grabbed my coat. The diner was a relic of the 50s that had stopped trying to be charming 2 decades ago. The air inside smelled of burnt bacon and stale coffee. Evelyn Rhodes was sitting in a booth in the back corner, looking entirely out of place in her tailored suit against the cracked red vinyl seats. She did not have a menu. She had an iPad Pro and a thick manila folder spread out on the sticky table. I slid into the booth opposite her. I did not order anything. "How did you know about the drive?" I asked. No pleasantries. Evelyn looked up close. Her eyes were even Rosalie, a piercing gray that seemed to catalog every micro-expression on my face. "I have been watching your stepmother's digital footprint for 3 months, Evelyn said, tapping the screen of her iPad. "I saw a massive data exfiltration from the office IP address at 2 a.m. 3 weeks ago. Given that Monica thinks password is a strong password, and your father struggles to open a PDF, I assumed it was the disgruntled architect working the night shift." She pushed a cup of black coffee toward me. "Drink. You look like you are about to pass out." I ignored the coffee. "Who hired you? Did the bank send you?" "Nobody hired me. Not yet," Evelyn said. "I specialize in a very specific type of case. Rosalie, I look for assets that are being undervalued by predators, and I look for heirs who are too polite to fight back. You fit the profile." "I am not polite," I snapped. "I am strategic." "You are losing," she corrected gently, "but that is about to change." She swiped a finger across her iPad and spun it around to face me. "Tell me what you see." It was a map of Redstone Ridge, but it was not a standard Google map. It was a zoning overlay, color-coded in vibrant blues and purples. "This is the county zoning map," I said, frowning. "This is our motel here, right off the highway exit." "Look at the date on the overlay," Evelyn said. I squinted. "October 14th. That was 2 weeks ago." "Correct." 2 weeks ago, the City Council quietly approved a rezoning measure for the entire corridor leading up to the mountains. They are calling it the Gateway District. They are not just patching potholes. Rosalie, they are clearing the way for luxury mixed-use developments, high-end retail, condos, and boutique hospitality. She zoomed in on the High Plains Lodge. Your father thinks this land is worth maybe $2 million, mostly for the existing business cash flow. Monica thinks it is worth $5 million, which is why she is trying to sell it to Evercrest quickly. Evelyn leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. But with this new zoning, this 6-acre plot is the anchor point for the entire district. It is the only flat land with direct highway access and mountain views. To a developer who knows about the zoning change, this dirt is worth $20 million, minimum. I sat back, the breath knocked out of me. $20 million. Does Monica know? I asked. She knows it is valuable, but she does not know the full extent. Evelyn replied. She suspects. That is why she is panicked. That is why she is forcing the transfer to HPL Frontier Holdings and why she tried to lowball you with $40,000. She wants to secure the title in her name before the rezoning becomes public knowledge next month. Once the news breaks, the property taxes will spike, and your father would realize the true value. She needs him out of the ownership structure now. She is stealing $20 million from him, I whispered. She is stealing it from you, Evelyn corrected. Your father is a liability to her. Once she sells to Evercrest or develops it herself, do you think she is going to keep nursing a sick husband? She will dump him in a state facility and move to Santa Fe with her son. The image of my father, alone and confused in a state home, made my hands clench into fists under the table. I have evidence, I said. I have the ledgers. I have the emails where she discusses the sale with Evercrest. Good, but not enough, Evelyn said. She opened the manila folder. You have evidence of mismanagement. That gets you a civil lawsuit that drags on for 5 years while she drains the accounts. I am interested in something else. She slid a sheet of paper across the table. It was a bank transfer record, but not one I recognized. I found these, Evelyn said. Every month, for the last 2 years, Monica has been transferring sums of $3,000, $4,000, sometimes $5,000 to an entity called Blue Spruce Ventures. I have never heard of it, I said. Neither had I. So I dug. Evelyn smiled, a cold, predatory baring of teeth. It is a private equity fund, but it is not a normal investment account. It is an offshore vehicle registered in the Cayman Islands. Do you know who the beneficiary is? I shook my head. Tyler Hale, Evelyn said. She is not just buying him rims. Rosalie, she is siphoning the operating capital of your father's business into an untraceable trust fund for her son. That is not just mismanagement. That is criminal fraud. That is tax evasion. That is prison time. I stared at the paper. The numbers blurred. $3,000 here, $5,000 there. That was the roof money. That was the money for the new boiler. That was the money I had begged for so we could hire a second housekeeper. She has been bleeding us dry, I said, my voice shaking. While I was scrubbing toilets to save $50 on cleaning fees, she was wiring thousands to the Caymans. Exactly, Evelyn said. She closed the folder. Here is the situation. Monica is smart, but she is greedy, and greed makes people sloppy. She is rushing this sale to Evercrest because she needs to cash out before the IRS asks why the motel is reporting a loss, but she is buying luxury cars. Evelyn leaned back, crossing her arms. I can help you, Rosalie. I can stop the sale. I can recover the assets. I can make sure your father keeps his share and you get yours. But I have a condition. What condition? I asked. My percentage? You want a cut? I take 30% of the recovered assets. Standard fee, Evelyn said dismissively. That is not the condition. The condition is that you have to be willing to destroy the peace. She looked me dead in the eye. Your father is going to hate this. He is in denial. He loves her. Or he thinks he does. If we do this, we are going to expose his wife as a criminal. We are going to humiliate him publicly. We are going to show the world that he was a fool who let his business be looted. He might never forgive you for saving him." I thought about the dining room table. I thought about Dad signing the papers without looking at me. I thought about his voice saying, "You are an artist, Rosalie." "He is already gone, Evelyn," I said quietly. "The father I knew would never have let her hit me. He would never have let her fire me." "So?" Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "So?" I reached into my bag and pulled out the flash drive. I placed it on the table between us. It looked small and insignificant against the pile of legal documents. I am not doing this to get his forgiveness. I am doing this to get my life back. Evelyn picked up the drive. She weighed it in her hand for a moment, then slipped it into her pocket. "Excellent," she said. "The Evercrest deal is supposed to be announced at their regional summit in 3 days. Monica thinks she is going there to be crowned Queen of the Mountain." Evelyn's smile returned, and this time, it reached her eyes. It was terrifying. "Let us make sure she leaves in handcuffs, or at the very least, with nothing but the clothes on her back." "One question," I said, as Evelyn began packing up her iPad. "Why me? You said you only take cases if the client is worth it. Why did you pick a motel manager in the middle of nowhere?" Evelyn paused. She looked at me, her expression softening just a fraction. "I saw your portfolio, Rowan," she said. My eyes widened. "You think I researched the stepmother and did not research the stepdaughter?" Evelyn stood up, sliding her purse over her shoulder. "The Silver Line Horizons proposal, the Veteran Recovery Center, it is brilliant work. You designed a place for broken people to put themselves back together." She looked down at me. "I figured if you could build a sanctuary like that for strangers, imagine what you could build if you finally cleared the rubble out of your own life." She dropped a $20 bill on the table for the coffee I hadn't touched. "Get some sleep, Rosalie. Tomorrow, we go to war." The war room was not a bunker underground. It was a corner suite on the 14th floor of the Hyatt Regency in downtown Denver, paid for by Rhodes and Calder Associates. The room smelled of fresh coffee and laser printer ozone. 72 hours, Evelyn said, standing by the floor-to-ceiling window looking out at the Rockies. "That is the timeline. Tuesday morning, 9 o'clock, the Aspen Ridge Resort." I sat at the glass desk, watching a junior associate named Marcus synchronize the data from my flash drive with a timeline on a large monitor. "What happens Tuesday?" I asked. "The Mountain West Investment Summit." Evelyn turned, her silhouette sharp against the morning light. "Evercrest Capital Partners hosts it every year. It is a parade of ego where developers show off their acquisitions. Monica is not just selling the motel. Rosalie, she is the keynote acquisition. She is scheduled to walk on stage at 10:30 to sign the Memorandum of Understanding alongside the CEO of Evercrest. She is going to be introduced as the visionary founder of HPL Frontier Holdings." My stomach turned over. Visionary founder? She was a freelance bookkeeper. "And you are going to let her say it," Evelyn said, walking over to the table. "We are not going to file an injunction today. We are not going to call the police. If we stop her now, she claims it is a misunderstanding. She blames a clerical error. She spins it." Evelyn placed a hand flat on the table. "We let her walk up those stairs. We let her stand in front of the press. We let her hold the pen. And then, we pull the floor out from under her while the cameras are rolling. It was a heist. We were not stealing money. We were stealing the narrative. For the next 10 hours, we built the weapon." Marcus, a forensic accountant who looked like he hadn't slept in a week because he enjoyed the work too much, was assembling what we called the blue file. This was the nuclear option for my father. It contained the side-by-side comparison of the motel's operating income versus the transfers to the Cayman Islands. It had the time-stamped security footage of Tyler's car modifications paid for with roof repair funds. It had the medical records showing the dates of my father's sedation overlapping with the dates of his signature on the transfer documents. "This is airtight," Marcus said, tapping the screen. "I have traced the IP address of the transfer requests. They all come from the desktop in the back office. logged in under the admin profile Monica Hale. She did not even use a VPN. It is arrogant. She thinks she is untouchable because she thinks no one is looking, I said. While Marcus finalized the evidence, I had a harder call to make. I had to merge my two lives. I went into the bedroom of the suite and dialed the number for the project lead at Silverline Horizons. My hands were sweating. "This is Sarah from Silverline," the voice answered. "Hi, Sarah. This is Rowan," I said, my voice steady. "Or rather, this is Rosalie Cole. I am the lead architect for Northwind Habitat Studio." There was a pause. "Rosalie Cole, as in the manager of the site Evercrest is trying to buy?" "The same," I said. "I have a situation. I am about to expose significant fraud regarding the ownership of that land. If Silverline wants a clean shot at the property for the Veteran Center, I need you to trust me. I am going to make a scene at the summit on Tuesday. I need permission to use the Northwind rendering as part of my counter-presentation." I held my breath. If they said no, I was just a bitter daughter with a grievance. If they said yes, I was a professional fighting for a project. "Evercrest is our biggest competitor in the region," Sarah said slowly. "If their due diligence failed so badly that they are buying a stolen asset, we would not mind watching them get a black eye. As long as our name is kept out of the mud, you can use the rendering. In fact, if you pull this off, we might have a press release ready to go immediately after." I hung up, feeling a surge of power I had not felt in years. I was not asking for permission anymore. I was coordinating allies. Evelyn made her move next. She drafted a letter to the General Counsel of Evercrest. It was a masterpiece of legal ambiguity. It did not accuse them of anything. It simply asked for clarification regarding the chain of title and beneficiary structure of HPL Frontier Holdings, and noted that a third-party audit of the asset is currently underway. "This will not stop the summit," Evelyn explained as she hit send. "Corporate lawyers are slow. They will receive this, panic slightly, and send a junior lawyer to the summit just to watch. That is exactly who we want in the room. We want a witness from their side who realizes they almost bought a radioactive asset." By 6 p.m, the plan was set. I had to go back to Redstone Ridge. I had to play the victim for 36 more hours. Driving back to the motel felt like driving into a movie set where I knew the script, but the other actors did not. When I walked into the lobby, Monica was there, directing a delivery crew. They were moving new furniture into the office, white leather chairs that looked ridiculous against the wood paneling. "Rosalie," she said, not looking up from her clipboard, "I assume you have been looking for apartments? Or did you spend the night crying in your car?" "I stayed with a friend," I lied, keeping my shoulders slumped, my eyes downcast. "I am thinking about the offer. Monica, the $40,000, it is a lot of money." Monica stopped and turned to me. A smile spread across her face, genuine and terrifying. "See? I knew you were smart. There is no shame in knowing when you are beaten. Rosalie, you take that money, go to Chicago, paint your little pictures, leave the business to the adults." "I just need until Tuesday," I said, "to say goodbye to the place." "Tuesday is fine," she said dismissively. "We will be at the summit in Aspen all day Tuesday. Big presentation. You can pack your things while we are gone. Leave the keys on the desk." She had no idea. She was so blinded by her own victory lap that she did not see the wolf standing right in front of her. I worked the night shift one last time. It was surreal. I checked in a trucker at 2 a.m. I plunged a toilet in room 14 at 3. I walked the perimeter at 4, checking the locks. Every mundane task felt heavy with significance. This was the last time I would do this as a servant. Next time I walked these grounds, I would be the owner, or I would be nothing. At 5 a.m, just as the sun was bleeding gray light over the highway, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a personal email from the director of Silverline Horizons. Subject: Decision Notification, Veterans Recovery Center Project. I sat down on the curb outside the laundry room, the same curb where I used to cry after Monica's lectures. My finger hovered over the screen. I opened it, Dear Miss Cole, after reviewing the final concepts, we are pleased to inform you that Northwind Habitat Studio has been selected as the lead architectural partner for the $35 million recovery initiative. Your design displayed a depth of empathy and functional understanding that the other firms lacked. We look forward to formalizing the contract next week. I let out a breath that sounded like a sob, but my eyes were dry. $35 million. My family thought I was worth a $40,000 severance package. They thought I was a failed artist. They thought I was a bad investment. But the world, the real world, the professional world, saw me. They saw the value of what I could build. I looked up at the flickering neon sign of the High Plains Lodge. For 3 years, I had let Monica and my father define my worth. I had let them tell me I was small. Not anymore, I whispered to the cold morning air. I stood up and dusted off my pants. I went into the back office and printed the Silverline acceptance letter. I folded it carefully and placed it in the inside pocket of the suit Evelyn had bought for me, the suit I was hiding in the trunk of my car. The sun broke over the horizon, hitting the mountains in the distance. Aspen Ridge was up there. Monica was waking up right now, probably picking out her outfit for the summit, thinking about the applause she would receive. She was preparing for her coronation. She did not know that she was actually preparing for her trial. I walked to my car, the gravel crunching under my boots. The timeline was locked. The evidence was ready. The blue file was in my bag. 72 hours had become 24. Game on, I said, and started the engine. The air in the Aspen Ridge Conference Resort was thinner than down in the valley. Or maybe it was just the collective ego of 300 millionaires sucking the oxygen out of the room. The grand ballroom was a cavern of reclaimed timber and floor-to-ceiling glass that looked out over the snow-capped peaks, a setting designed to make wealthy people feel like titans of industry. I sat in the middle of row 6, an anonymous figure in a charcoal gray suit that Evelyn had selected. It was sharp, tailored, and cost more than 3 months of my salary at the motel. For the first time in years, I did not look like the help. I looked like I belonged in the room, beside me. Evelyn sat with her legs crossed, scrolling through her phone with a boredom that was entirely performative. On the stage, a massive banner displayed the logos of Evercrest Capital Partners and HPL Frontier Holdings intertwined, like a marriage announcement for corporations. Then, the doors at the side of the stage opened. Monica walked out first. She was wearing a cream-colored dress that I recognized from a Vogue spread, something she must have bought on credit card debt she planned to pay off with the sale money. She waved to the crowd as if she were royalty. Behind her came my father. Daniel Cole looked lost. They had dressed him in a tuxedo that was slightly too big in the shoulders, making him look shrunken and frail. He held Monica's arm not out of affection, but for balance. He blinked against the stage lights, scanning the dark room, perhaps looking for a friendly face. He would not find me. Not yet. Trailing them was Tyler. My half-brother was wearing a suit that still had the creases from the packaging. He looked bored, chewing gum, his eyes darting to his phone every few seconds. He had no idea what was happening. He thought he was there to inherit a kingdom he had never lifted a finger to build. The CEO of Evercrest, a man with a tan so deep it looked painted on, took the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen," he boomed, his voice echoing off the timber beams. "We are here to celebrate not just an acquisition, but a partnership, a vision. Please welcome the founder of HPL Frontier Holdings, the woman who turned a roadside relic into a diamond in the rough, Mrs. Monica Hale." The applause was polite but enthusiastic. Monica stepped up to the microphone. She adjusted it, beamed at the audience, and began the performance of her life. "Thank you," she said, her voice trembling with practiced emotion. "When I first took over the High Plains Lodge, it was in ruins. My husband, Daniel, was too ill to manage the burden. It was a dark time, but I knew that with grit, determination, and a woman's touch, we could save our family legacy." I gripped the armrests of my chair, my knuckles turned white. A woman's touch. She was talking about the nights I spent scrubbing grout with a toothbrush. She was talking about the vendor contracts I negotiated while she was at the spa. It required sacrifice, Monica continued, wiping a non-existent tear. I had to make hard choices. I had to modernize. I had to lead. My stepdaughter, Rosalie, was a devoted manager. Of course, she kept the keys organized. But the younger generation, sometimes they lack the vision to see the big picture. They do not understand the heavy lifting required to build an empire. A few people in the audience nodded sympathetically. The narrative was perfect. The heroic matriarch saving the business from the incompetent husband and the lazy stepchild. And now, Monica smiled, gesturing to the Evercrest CEO, I am proud to entrust this legacy to Evercrest, to take it to the next level. The CEO stepped forward, holding a leather folder, the memorandum of understanding, the preliminary agreement that would lock in the sale price and effectively transfer control. Shall we sign? The CEO asked, uncapping a gold pen. Monica reached for the pen. My father just stood there, looking at his shoes. This was it. Suddenly, a voice rang out from the front row. One moment, please. It was a man in a navy suit, the general counsel for Evercrest. He stood up, holding a piece of paper, the letter Evelyn had sent yesterday. The room went deadly quiet. The CEO froze, pen in midair. We have received a notification regarding a cloud on the title, the lawyer said, his voice carrying clearly without a microphone, and some concerning inquiries regarding the financial solvency of HPL Frontier Holdings. Before any signature is placed on that document, Evercrest Legal requires a full clarification of the ownership structure. Monica laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. Oh, do not be silly. It is just some paperwork mix-up. My stepdaughter she is a bit unstable. She is probably just acting out. Evelyn nudged my knee. Now. I stood up. The sound of my chair scraping against the floor was loud in the silence. I walked out of the row, into the center aisle. I did not look at the floor. I looked straight at the stage. I am not unstable. Monica, I said. My voice was not loud, but in the acoustic perfection of the hall, it traveled. And I am not just the girl who keeps the keys organized. Heads turned. 300 investors, reporters, and developers swiveled to look at me. Monica squinted against the spotlight, her face paling as she recognized me. Rosalie? She hissed into the microphone, forgetting it was on. What are you doing here? Security. I am a minority shareholder, I said, walking steadily toward the stage. And I am the managing director of the High Plains Lodge. If Evercrest wants clarification on the financials, I think they should hear it from the person who actually balanced the books for the last 3 years. I reached the stairs. A security guard stepped forward to block me. But Evelyn was already there. She flashed a badge and a court order she had pulled from her briefcase. She has the floor, Evelyn said to the guard, her voice like a whip crack. Unless you want to be named in the obstruction of justice lawsuit, I am filing this afternoon. The guard stepped back. I walked up the stairs. I walked past the stunned CEO. I walked past my father, who looked up at me with eyes wide with shock and confusion. I stopped at the podium, standing right next to Monica. She looked small up close. Without her anger to inflate her, she was just a terrified woman in an expensive dress. Give me the remote, I said softly. You are ruining everything, she whispered, her eyes full of venom. I gently took the presentation clicker from her hand. I pulled the USB drive from my pocket and plugged it into the laptop sitting on the lectern. Ladies and gentlemen, I said into the microphone, my stepmother told you a story about resilience. I would like to tell you a story about arithmetic. I clicked the button. The screen behind us, which had been displaying a glossy photo of the proposed resort, turned black. Then, a spreadsheet appeared. This is the operating income for the motel for the last 24 months, I said. You will see a healthy cash flow, but if you look at column D, you will see a recurring transfer to an entity called Blue Spruce Ventures. I clicked again. A new slide appeared, a registration document from the Cayman Islands. Blue Spruce Ventures is an offshore trust, I explained. The sole beneficiary is Tyler Hale. The room erupted in murmurs. Tyler, standing in the background, stopped chewing his gum. He looked at the screen, then at his mother. "Mom, what is that?" "It is a lie," Monica shouted, trying to grab the microphone. "She forged it!" I sidestepped her. I clicked again. A video started playing. It was grainy security footage, time-stamped 3 months ago. It showed Monica opening the safe in the back office, taking out stacks of cash, and stuffing them into her purse. Then it cut to a clip of Tyler's car driving into a custom auto shop, followed by an invoice paid for by the motel's emergency repair fund. "That is the money for the roof," I said, my voice shaking slightly with the release of 3 years of anger. "That is the money for the boiler." While my father was worried about bankruptcy, his capital was being driven around town on 20-inch rims. "Daniel, stop her!" Monica grabbed my father's arm, shaking him. "She is crazy! She is jealous!" But my father was staring at the screen. He was staring at the invoice. He looked at Monica, then at the screen, and for the first time in years, the fog in his eyes seemed to clear. I clicked one last time. The screen showed 2 documents side by side. One was a medical chart showing my father was under heavy sedation at 2 o'clock in the afternoon on the 12th of October. The other was the transfer of deed, signed by Daniel Cole, at 2:15 on the 12th of October. "You signed the property over to yourself while he was unconscious," I said, looking directly at Monica. "That is not business. Monica, that is fraud." The flashbulbs from the press section started popping like fireworks. The murmur in the room turned into a roar. Monica looked around wildly. She looked at the Evercrest CEO, who had backed away to the edge of the stage as if she were contagious. She looked at Tyler, who was looking at her with a mix of horror and betrayal. "I did it for us," she screamed, her voice cracking. "I did it to save the family." Evelyn stepped up to the microphone, her presence commanding immediate silence. "I am Evelyn Rhodes, legal counsel for Rosalie Cole and Daniel Cole," she announced. "We are hereby serving notice that the transfer of assets to HPL Frontier Holdings is contested on the grounds of fraud, embezzlement, and undue influence. Any agreement signed today is null and void." The general counsel for Evercrest stood up again. He buttoned his jacket. "Evercrest Capital Partners is withdrawing its offer effective immediately," he shouted over the noise. "We will not be party to a criminal investigation. The deal is dead." "No!" Monica shrieked, lunging toward the CEO. "You cannot. We have a verbal agreement." But the CEO was already walking off the stage, flanked by his security team. I stood alone at the podium, the clicker still in my hand. I looked at my father. He was weeping silently, tears tracking through the wrinkles of his face. He pulled his arm away from Monica's grip. Monica stood center stage, the spotlight still on her, but there was no applause. There was no check. There was just the cold, hard silence of 300 people realizing they had almost been conned. She looked at me, and her face crumbled. The mask was gone. "You ungrateful little brat," she sobbed. "I gave you a home." "No," I said, my voice amplified through the speakers, echoing through the hall. "You took a home. I just took it back." I unplugged my USB drive. The screen went black. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the sound of Monica weeping and the furious scratching of reporters' pens. The empire she had tried to steal had crumbled in exactly 6 minutes. But as I looked at my father's devastated face, I knew the victory was not clean. The building was saved, but the family was rubble, and I was the one who had detonated the bomb. The silence in the ballroom did not last long. It was broken by the sound of a dynasty cracking apart, followed immediately by the chaotic shutter clicks of the local press corps. I walked out of the Aspen Ridge Resort with Evelyn Rhodes by my side, moving through a gauntlet of reporters who had smelled blood in the water. I kept my head high, refusing to answer the shouted questions about fraud, about the Cayman Islands, about the collapse of the deal. Behind us, security was trying to restrain Monica, who was screaming that I was a liar, a thief, and a traitor. By the time we reached Evelyn's black sedan, the story was already live. My phone vibrated with a notification from the Denver Post. The headline was brutal in its simplicity. Family feud explodes at investment summit. High Plains Lodge sale halts amidst fraud allegations. The photo accompanying the article was a masterpiece of accidental composition. It showed Monica on stage, her mouth open in a rictus of panic, clutching the podium as if it were a life raft. In the foreground, slightly out of focus but unmistakable, was my profile, calm and collected, unplugging the drive. "You look like an assassin in a business suit," Evelyn commented as she steered the car onto the mountain highway, leaving the resort in the rearview mirror. "I feel like I just watched a car crash that I caused," I replied, staring out at the pine trees blurring past. "You did not cause the crash, Rosalie," Evelyn said, her eyes on the road. "You just turned on the headlights so everyone could see the wreck." My father did not see it that way. We had left him in the lobby, surrounded by confusion. An hour later, my phone rang. It was him. I put it on speaker. "You were manipulated." Daniel's voice was shaking, not with sorrow, but with a defensive, frantic anger. "That woman, that lawyer, she put you up to this. She twisted the numbers." "The numbers were not twisted, Dad," I said, my voice tired. "They were bank records. You saw them." "Monica was trying to diversify our portfolio," he shouted. It was the desperate cry of a man who could not admit he had been sleeping while his house was being robbed. "She told me about the offshore accounts. It was for tax efficiency. You humiliated her. Rosalie, you humiliated us. We are a laughingstock." "She was buying Tyler a car with the roof money," I said, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. "She signed the deed while you were sedated." "I signed it willingly," he lied. I knew he was lying. He knew he was lying. But the alternative, admitting that his wife viewed him as a signature on a checkbook and nothing more, was too painful for him to bear. "You have ruined this family because you were jealous that I chose her to run the business. Do not come back to the motel. Rosalie, you are done." The line went dead. I looked at Evelyn. She did not say anything, but she didn't have to. We both knew what had happened. He had fled the resort, probably taking a cab, leaving Monica to face the music alone because he was too cowardly to face the truth, yet too proud to side with the daughter who had saved him. He chose denial because denial was comfortable. But the rest of the world was not so forgiving. By 3 o'clock that afternoon, the dominoes began to fall with satisfying, rhythmic precision. The first notification came from the legal department of Evercrest Capital Partners. It was a formal letter sent to HPL Frontier Holdings, with a carbon copy to Evelyn. "Dear Mrs. Hale, in light of the material disclosures made during today's summit, Evercrest Capital Partners is hereby formally suspending all negotiations regarding the acquisition of High Plains Lodge. Furthermore, we are retaining independent auditors to review the preliminary data you provided during due diligence. If we find that you knowingly misrepresented the financial health or ownership structure of the asset, we reserve the right to seek damages for time and resources expended." Monica's big exit strategy had just turned into a legal bear trap. Then came the messages from the staff. I had not spoken to Ben, the head of maintenance, or Mrs. Gable, the housekeeper, about my plan. I did not want to implicate them, but as I sat in the passenger seat of Evelyn's car, my WhatsApp began to ping. "Ben, saw the news? Is it true she spent $4,000 on that kid's car? I have been patching the boiler with duct tape for 6 months because she said we had no budget. I kept the receipts where she denied my purchase orders. Sending them to you now. Mrs. Gable." "Honey, I do not know what is happening, but the police are here asking for logs. I gave them the notebook I keep, the one where I track the hours she tells me to delete from the system. I hope you are safe." I felt a lump form in my throat. They were not scared. They were relieved. For years, they had been gaslit just like me, told that the business was failing because of the market, not because the profits were being siphoned off. Now, they had a focal point for their frustration. and they were handing me the ammunition I hadn't even asked for. But the biggest shock came at 5 o'clock. I was back in the temporary apartment I had rented in Denver. A small studio with peeling paint that smelled of lemon cleaner. I was sitting on the floor, still in my expensive suit, eating takeout noodles, when an unknown number called. "This is Rosalie," I answered. "Rosalie, this is Sarah from Silverline Horizons." I froze. I had used their project rendering without a formal contract. I had dragged their name into a public brawl. I braced myself for a lawsuit. "I am so sorry about the scene today." I started to apologize. "I tried to keep your logo out of the messy parts." "Are you kidding?" Sarah's voice was bright, almost laughing. "We watched the live stream in the boardroom. The partners loved it." "They loved it?" "Rosalie, we are in the business of building spaces for veterans, people who value integrity and grit. Watching you stand up to a bully and dismantle a fraudulent deal with a spreadsheet, that is exactly the kind of character we want leading our design team." She paused, and I could hear papers shuffling. "In fact, we have been discussing the site. Now that the Evercrest deal is dead, that land in Redstone Ridge is going to be in limbo. We know the zoning has changed. We want to make an offer, not to Monica, and not to your father, but to the legal entity that emerges from this mess. We want to use that specific site for the pilot program of the Recovery Center, and we want you to be the lead architect and the site liaison." I lowered the fork, my hand trembling. "You want to buy the motel?" "We want to buy the land," Sarah corrected, "and we want to pay fair market value for the new zoning. If your lawyers can untangle the ownership, we are ready to write a check for $12 million. That should be enough to pay off your father's debts, buy out your stepmother, and leave you with a very healthy budget to build your vision." $12 million. It was not the $20 million a luxury condo developer might pay, but it was honest money. It was healing money. "I will put you in touch with my lawyer," I managed to say. "Good. Get some rest. Rosalie, you have a big job ahead of you." I hung up, feeling lightheaded. I had not just stopped Monica. I had secured a future for the land that would actually help people, instead of turning it into another soulless ski condo. Of course, Monica did not go down quietly. An hour later, an email arrived from a generic law firm in the strip mall near the motel. It was a cease and desist order, accusing me of defamation of character, theft of proprietary trade secrets, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. It demanded I retract my statements and pay damages of $500,000. I forwarded it to Evelyn with a question mark. Evelyn replied 3 minutes later. She had CC'd me on her response to Monica's lawyer. "Dear counsel, we are in receipt of your letter. Please be advised that truth is an absolute defense against defamation. Regarding the theft of trade secrets, my client cannot steal what she legally owns as a partner in the business, a status we will prove in court using the fraudulent transfer documents your client coerced a sedated man to sign. If you wish to proceed with litigation, please note that we will be entering the offshore bank records of Blue Spruce Ventures into the public record during discovery. We await your filing with great interest. Sincerely, Evelyn Rhodes." It was the legal equivalent of a sniper shot. Monica would read that and know she had two choices: surrender or go to prison for tax evasion. But the victory was hollow in one specific way. My father was facing the abyss. I received a text from Gregory Pike, the family lawyer who had been so smug at the dinner table. He was panicked. The bank had called him. They had seen the news. They were freezing the motel's lines of credit and launching an investigation into Daniel's oversight. If the fraud was proven, my father could be held liable for negligence. He could lose everything he hadn't already lost. He was standing in the middle of a storm I had summoned, and he didn't even have an umbrella. I put my phone down and looked around the empty apartment. It was quiet. No neon lights flickering outside, no angry voices, just the hum of the refrigerator. I opened my laptop to check my personal email, bracing for more hate mail from family friends. Instead, I found an email with a subject line that made my breath hitch. "From your mother. Open when you are brave." It was sent from my aunt's address. My mother had died when I was 22, just before I started architecture school. I clicked it open. Rosalie, your aunt promised to send this to you only when you did something that scared you. If you are reading this, you must have finally jumped. I know you, my sweet girl. You are a builder. You like to fix things. You like to make broken things whole. But you have a habit of trying to fix people who do not want to be fixed. You get that from me. Do not let your father's weakness become your foundation. You are not the walls that hold him up. You are the door. You are the one who walks through. I am proud of you, not for what you build, but for who you are when the blueprint gets torn up. Love, Mom. I stared at the screen until the words blurred into gray shapes. Tears, hot and fast, finally spilled over. I hadn't cried in the parking lot. I hadn't cried on stage. I hadn't cried when my father disowned me. But I cried now. I realized that for the last 3 years, I had been Rosalie the daughter, Rosalie the manager, Rosalie the victim. I had defined myself by who I served and who I saved. Tonight, sitting on the floor of a cheap apartment with a $12 million offer in my pocket and a war raging outside, I was someone else. I was not Daniel Cole's daughter. I was not Monica Hale's stepdaughter. I was Rosalie Cole, architect, whistleblower. And for the first time in my life, I was the one holding the pen. The meeting took place 24 hours after the summit imploded. My father chose the location, a small, rented conference room in a generic office building in downtown Denver. He claimed he wanted neutral ground, but I knew he just wanted a place where Monica could not ambush us. He had explicitly asked for no lawyers. He wanted to talk father to daughter, a phrase that would have warmed my heart 3 years ago, but now just made me check my recording device to ensure it was running. When I walked in, Daniel Cole was standing by the window, looking out at the gray skyline. He did not turn around when the door clicked shut. His posture was rigid, his shoulders set in a way that mimicked the formidable businessman he used to be, but the illusion shattered the moment he spoke. "You have made quite a mess, Rosalie," he said to the glass. His voice was rough, scraping against the silence. I sat down at the small circular table. I did not apologize. I did not ask how he was. I simply placed 2 heavy binders on the laminate surface. The sound they made, a dull, heavy thud, finally made him turn. "I did not make the mess, Dad," I said calmly. "I just turned on the light so you could see the dirt." Daniel walked over to the table and sat opposite me. He looked 10 years older than he had on stage yesterday. His eyes were rimmed with red, and his hands, usually so steady, were clasping and unclasping in front of him. But his expression was not one of remorse, it was one of indignation. "You humiliated us," he said, his voice rising, "in front of the entire industry, in front of the press. You stood up there and branded your stepmother a criminal. You stabbed me in the back. Rosalie, after everything I have done to build this family, I built that motel from nothing, from 2 empty lots and a loan I had to beg for. And you treated it like a stage for your little revenge play." "I saved it," I corrected him. "Evercrest was going to buy it for pennies on the dollar, strip the assets, and leave you with a tax liability that would have bankrupted you. Monica was setting you up to take the fall for her embezzlement." "She made mistakes." Daniel slammed his hand on the table. It was a weak hit, lacking real force. "She was trying to be creative with the accounting. She was trying to secure a future for Tyler. Maybe she went too far. But she is my wife. You do not air family laundry in public. You come to me. You tell me." "I tried to tell you," I said, keeping my voice level. "For 3 years. I tried to show you the vendor overcharges. I tried to show you the shift gaps. You told me I was jealous. You told me I was an artist who did not understand business." I pushed the first binder toward him. It was black. "This is what Monica did," I said. "Evelyn's team compiled it. It is not just the Cayman transfers. Dad, it is the credit card fraud. It is the falsified invoices. It is the 3 separate times she forged your signature on loan applications while you were in the hospital. This is not creativity. This is a felony." Daniel stared at the black binder, He did not open it. He was afraid of what looking inside would mean. And this? I pushed the second binder toward him. It was red. This is what I did. He looked up at me, confused. Open it, I commanded. He hesitated, then flipped open the red binder. That is a log of every shift I covered for the last 36 months, I said as he turned the pages. Every night audit, every toilet I plunged because you would not hire a plumber, every contract I renegotiated to lower our overhead by 18%, every room I redesigned with my own hands to justify the rate hike that kept us solvent. I leaned forward. You asked why I felt entitled to stand on that stage? Because while Monica was buying rims for Tyler's car with your retirement fund, I was working 80-hour weeks to make sure there was money in the bank to steal. Daniel stopped turning the pages. He was looking at a spreadsheet Evelyn had created, comparing the motel's revenue before I took over management and after. The line went up at a 45-degree angle. I thought, Daniel started, then stopped. His voice was smaller now. I thought the market was just recovering. Monica said the marketing strategy was working. There was no marketing strategy. Dad, I said. There was just me, answering reviews at 3 a.m. The room fell silent. The air conditioning hummed, a low drone that underlined the tension. My father was shrinking in his chair. The bluster was evaporating, leaving behind a terrified old man who realized he had bet on the wrong horse. What do you want, Rosalie? He asked finally. He sounded exhausted. Do you want money? Is that it? You want a bigger severance? I want the truth, I said. And I want the motel. You cannot have it, he shook his head. Monica owns 51%. The transfer, the paperwork. The paperwork is fraudulent, I cut him off. Evelyn filed for an emergency injunction this morning. The transfer to HPL Frontier Holdings is frozen, which brings us to your choice. I laid out the terms I had prepared. Option A, I said, holding up a finger. We go to court. I hand this black binder to the district attorney. Monica goes to prison for tax evasion and elder abuse. You get dragged through a 2-year trial where everyone learns you were incompetent enough to let it happen. The banks foreclose on the motel to cover the legal fees. You lose everything. Daniel winced. He knew I was right. Option B, I continued. We restructure. Today, you admit the transfer was invalid. You strip Monica of her executive powers and her equity. You form a new entity, Coal Ridge Hospitality. You keep 40%. I take 60% and full operational control. Monica gets nothing but a settlement to go away, contingent on her silence. She will never agree to that, Daniel whispered. She will fight. She will burn it down. She can't, I said. Because if she fights, I give the black binder to the IRS. She knows that. Her lawyer knows that. The only person who doesn't seem to know that the game is over is you. Daniel looked at his hands. He was struggling, physically struggling, with the idea of betraying his wife, even after everything. The psychological hold she had on him was terrifyingly deep. She is my wife, Rosalie, he pleaded weakly. I cannot just throw her out on the street. She has needs. She has an offshore account with $200,000 of your money in it, I said cold. She will be fine. He still hesitated. He was looking for a way out, a middle ground where he could keep his wife and his daughter and his dignity. But that place did not exist. I decided to play the final card. I reached into my bag and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was the letter of intent from Silverline Horizons. There is one more thing, I said softly. Daniel looked at the paper. He saw the logo. He saw the figure. $12 million, he breathed. They do not want the motel business, I explained. They want the land. They want to build a veteran recovery center, a place that heals people, and they want me to design it. I watched the realization wash over him. If you side with Monica, I said, this offer disappears. Silverline will not touch a property tied up in fraud litigation. If you side with me, if you sign the restructuring agreement, we accept this offer. You pay off your debts, you retire with dignity, and the land becomes something you can actually be proud of. The phone in Daniel's pocket began to buzz. It buzzed against the table leg, a harsh, insistent vibration. He looked down at his pocket. "It is her," he said. "I know," I said. "She has been trying to sell the company fleet vehicles all morning. Evelyn blocked the sale an hour ago. She is panicking. Dad, she is calling you because she needs you to save her. She needs you to be the shield." The phone kept buzzing. It sounded like an angry insect. "Answer it if you want," I said, leaning back. "Tell her you are choosing option A. Tell her you are willing to go bankrupt to protect her crimes." Daniel stared at the pocket. His hand twitched. He looked at the black binder, then at the red binder, then at the letter from Silverline. For 3 years, he had chosen the easy lie over the hard truth. He had chosen the flashy smile over the quiet work. But looking at the numbers, looking at the sheer scale of the betrayal and the magnitude of the opportunity I had brought him, the denial finally cracked. He reached into his pocket. My heart hammered. If he answered, if he let her voice into his ear, I would lose him. He pulled the phone out. He looked at the screen. Monica calling. He pressed the side button. The buzzing stopped. He placed the phone face down on the table. He did not turn it off. He just silenced it. It was a small act of rebellion, but for Daniel Cole, it was a revolution. "Where do I sign?" he asked. His voice was hollow, like a ghost. I slid the restructuring agreement across the table. "Page 4, I said, "and page 7. Evelyn is waiting in the lobby to notarize it." Daniel took a pen from his pocket. It was a cheap plastic pen, not the gold one he had tried to use on stage yesterday. He hovered over the signature line. His hand was shaking. "Rosalie," he said, not looking up, "you have to understand. She made me feel relevant, like I wasn't just an old man dying in a motel office." "I know, Dad," I said, and I did know. That was Monica's genius. She sold relevance to men who feared obsolescence. "If I sign this," he said, the pen touching the paper, "she will leave me. The family will be broken. Things will not go back to how they were." He looked up at me then, his eyes pleading for me to absolve him, to tell him that we could fix it, that we could be a happy family again. I looked back at him. I thought about the slap in the parking lot. I thought about the night shifts. I thought about the moment he told me I was just an artist. "I do not need them to be how they were, Dad," I said. I pointed to the signature line. "I need them to be right." Daniel held my gaze for a long second. He saw the woman sitting across from him, not the child he could order around, not the employee he could exploit, but a partner who had outgrown him. He looked down and signed his name. The scratch of the pen against the paper was the loudest sound in the world. It was the sound of a dynasty ending, and a new one beginning. "It is done," he whispered, pushing the paper back to me. I took the document. I did not smile. I did not cheer. I just felt a massive, crushing weight lift off my chest. "Thank you," I said. I stood up and gathered the binders, the black one, the red one, the Silverline letter. "We have a meeting with Silverline's acquisition team on Thursday," I said, shifting instantly into business mode, because it was easier than dealing with the emotion in the room. "I expect you to be there, sober, and without her." Daniel nodded, staring at his silenced phone, which had started to buzz again. I walked to the door. I paused with my hand on the handle. "Dad?" He looked up. "You built the motel from nothing," I said. "But you did not build it alone. You had Mom. And for the last 3 years, you had me. You just forgot to look." I walked out of the conference room, leaving him alone with the buzzing phone and the wreckage of his own making. The conference room on the 17th floor of the law firm in downtown Denver was quiet. It was not the tense, suffocating silence of the dining room table where I had been fired 2 weeks ago. This was the clean, sterile silence of a hospital operating room after the surgery is finished and the patient has survived, but just barely. Monica was not there. She was currently sitting in a much smaller, much less comfortable room across town, answering questions from a forensic auditor and an investigator from the IRS regarding the tax implications of her offshore trust. Her absence was the loudest thing in the room. My father sat at the long mahogany table. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him, stripped of the bluster and the false confidence Monica had pumped into him like helium. Beside him sat his personal attorney, a man who looked relieved that he was no longer taking instructions from a woman who viewed tax laws as suggestions. Evelyn Rhodes stood at the head of the table. She did not look triumphant. She looked efficient. She slid the final agreement across the polished wood. "The terms are exactly as we discussed," Evelyn said, her voice cutting through the air. "The High Plains Lodge entity is dissolved. All assets are transferred to the newly formed Coal Ridge Hospitality." I watched my father pick up the document. His hands were trembling slightly, a tremor that had nothing to do with his heart condition and everything to do with the reality of what he was reading. "Shareholder breakdown," Evelyn continued, reciting the terms for the record. "Daniel Cole retains 40% equity as a silent partner. Rosalie Cole assumes 60% equity and the title of managing partner. All executive decisions regarding operations, capital expenditures, and personnel are at the sole discretion of the managing partner." Daniel looked up at me. His eyes were watery. 60%, he whispered. "I built it." "And you almost lost it," I said gently. "This structure protects the asset. It protects you." "And Monica?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "Monica Hale is being bought out for the sum of $150,000, Evelyn said, her tone icy. "Which is generous, considering she embezzled nearly 3 times that amount. The settlement includes a strict non-disclosure agreement and a permanent restraining order barring her from coming within 500 feet of the property or contacting any employees." Daniel flinched. The woman he had defended, the woman he had chosen over me, was being surgically excised from his life like a tumor. "There is one more clause," I said, leaning forward. "Turn to page 12. Daniel flipped the pages. He squinted at the text. "The land usage agreement," I explained. "Coal Ridge Hospitality is entering into a joint venture with Silverline Horizons Group. We are not selling the land. We are leasing the rear 4 acres for the construction of the Veteran Recovery Center." I pointed to the paragraph at the bottom. "And the design contract for that center," I said, my voice steady, "is awarded exclusively to Northwind Habitat Studio, my company." Daniel looked up, shock registering on his face. "You are contracting yourself?" "I am contracting the best architect for the job," I corrected him. "Northwind is independent of Coal Ridge. My success is no longer tied solely to your legacy. Dad, I am building my own. This deal values the land at $12 million over the lease term. It clears your debts, it secures your retirement, and it lets me build something that matters." It was the checkmate. I wasn't just taking back the motel. I was using it as the foundation for the career they told me I had to abandon. While we sat in that room, the world outside was finishing the job we had started. I checked my phone under the table. Monica had tried to launch a counteroffensive on social media an hour ago, posting a tearful video claiming she was the victim of a hostile corporate takeover by a vindictive stepdaughter. It had backfired spectacularly. The local business journal had just published their deep dive into the blue file documents that had been entered into the public record. The comments on her video were not sympathetic. They were links to the articles about the Cayman Islands Trust and the roof repair fraud. She was being dismantled in real time, her reputation shredding faster than she could delete the comments. "Sign it, Daniel," his lawyer murmured. "It is the only way to stop the bank from calling the loans." My father picked up the pen. He hesitated for a long second, the tip hovering over the paper. I knew what he was thinking. He was thinking about the empty seat next to him. He was thinking about the quiet house he would go back to. But then he looked at me. He saw the woman in the tailored suit who had secured a multi-million-dollar deal in less than 48 hours. He saw the daughter who had refused to break. He signed every page, his signature shaky but legible. With every stroke of the pen, he surrendered the control he had misused and handed it to the person who had actually earned it. 2 weeks later, the air in Redstone Ridge was crisp and smelled of pine and wet earth. I stood on the back lot of the motel, the area that used to be a dumping ground for broken furniture and rusted appliances. It was cleared now. Orange survey flags fluttered in the wind, marking the perimeter of what would soon be the Silverline Recovery Center. I was holding a roll of blueprints. My blueprints. For the first time, they weren't hidden in a folder named tax records. They were stamped with the official seal of approval from the city planning office. "It is going to be big," a voice said behind me. I turned. It was Tyler. My half-brother looked different. He wasn't wearing the designer streetwear Monica used to buy him. He was wearing work boots and a plain gray t-shirt. He looked tired. "It is going to be transformative," I said. "How is the housekeeping rotation going?" Tyler rubbed the back of his neck, looking embarrassed. "Mrs. Gable is a drill sergeant. I did not know cleaning a bathroom took 20 minutes. I thought you just wiped it." "You learn fast," I said. When the dust had settled, I hadn't kicked Tyler out. He was 20, foolish, and had been raised by a narcissist. But he wasn't malicious. I had offered him a choice. He could leave with his mother and live off her dwindling settlement, or he could stay and work. But he would start at the bottom, minimum wage, no special treatment. "I am sorry, Rosalie," Tyler said, looking at his boots. "About the car, about everything. Mom told me the money came from investments. I didn't know it was the roof money." "I know you didn't," I said. "But now you know how hard it is to earn that money. Keep your head down. Tyler, do the work. That is the only way you fix this." He nodded, grabbed a bag of trash from the ground, and walked back toward the motel. He walked differently now. He walked like someone who was beginning to understand gravity. "He has a better work ethic than I gave him credit for," another voice said. My father walked up to stand beside me. He was using a cane now, not because he physically needed it, but because he seemed to have aged 10 years in 2 weeks. The arrogance was gone. He looked out at the survey flags. "Silverline sent the deposit today," he said quietly. "The bank loans are paid off. We are in the black for the first time in a decade." "I saw the alert," I said. Daniel turned to look at me. The wind ruffled his thinning hair. "You know," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "when I look at what you put together, the lease structure, the design, the legal protections, I realize something." He paused, swallowing hard. "Maybe the person who should have been signing with Silverline from the very beginning was you, not me. I was so afraid of losing control that I gave it to the wrong person. It was the apology I had waited 3 years to hear. It was the validation that the architect and the manager were not 2 different people, but one formidable woman. I could have hugged him. I could have told him it was all okay. But that would have been a lie. It wasn't okay. It was just resolved. "I appreciate that, Dad," I said, looking him in the eye. "But I do not need you to tell me I am capable. I need you to promise me something else." "Anything," he said. "Don't close your eyes anymore," I said. "The next time you sign something, you read it. The next time someone tells you they are saving you, you ask them what it costs. You stay awake." Daniel nodded slowly. "I will stay awake." That evening, as the sun dipped behind the Rockies, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and triumphant gold, I walked out to the parking lot. The neon sign above the lobby was buzzing, but it wasn't flickering. I had fixed the transformer yesterday. The O in Lodge burned with a steady, bright red light. I stood in the exact spot where Monica had slapped me. I looked at the asphalt. The stain from the oil leak was still there, faint but visible. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the cream-colored business card. Evelyn Rhodes, Strategic Litigation. It was bent at the corners now. It had been in my pocket through the panic, the planning, the confrontation, and the victory. I remembered the moment Evelyn had handed it to me. I remembered the cold, humiliating sting of the slap. I remembered thinking my life was over. But standing here now, the owner of a multi-million-dollar company, the lead architect of a landmark project, and the woman who had cleaned house, I realized the truth. That slap hadn't been the end, it had been the starting gun. I put the card back in my pocket. I didn't need it anymore, but I would keep it. A reminder that the difference between a victim and a victor is simply the refusal to stay on the ground. I turned around and looked at the camera I had installed, the one that had caught everything. I winked at it. Then, I walked through the automatic doors of my motel, ready to start my shift, not as the daughter who kept the keys, but as the woman who owned the lock. Audio recording click. Here is the truth. Nobody tells you in business school. If you are working yourself to the bone for a family or a company that treats your sacrifice as a default setting, stop waiting for them to thank you. They won't. They are not the ones who get to decide what you are worth. You are. Take the notes. Save the emails. Learn the systems better than the people who claim to run them. Build your skills in the dark if you have to. And when the moment comes, and it always comes, do not be afraid to turn the table over. Sometimes, the business card you need isn't the one a stranger hands you. It is the first decision you dare to sign for yourself. This is Rosalie Cole signing off. Thank you so much for listening to Rosalie's journey of reclaiming her worth. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Drop a comment below with your country or city, and let's share our thoughts on dealing with toxic family dynamics. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories. Hit that like button, and smash the hype button to help this story reach more people who need to hear it.